start by having each of the additional panelists introduce themselves and then give you just a minute or two sharing their perspectives on broader impacts, activities, and evaluation. And you'll see that we have some additional evaluation expertise with Soko Staroven, and then we have faculty researchers Suleiman and Mike Kessler, and they have worked in various areas and incorporated broader impacts, and so you get a little bit of additional perspective before we go into a little bit more of an interactive session with all of you.
Okay, well, hi everyone. My name is Mike Kessler. I'm an associate professor in material science and engineering, and I think I'm representing sort of the single investigator kind of efforts. My background with the NSF proposals, I have a few proposals that I've gotten, most recently an NSF career proposal, and then I am involved in program reviews. So this year I was on 3 panels, and that's actually one good way to learn about the process is to become a reviewer, and so I would recommend that. You get to learn sort of what makes a good, strong proposal, what makes a weak proposal, and you see examples of proposals that get funded. One of the things that I've learned from that experience is that the broader impacts section of the proposal often is the thing that differentiates 2 good proposals, and sometimes there's a lot of broader impact ideas that may seem novel and creative, but then you see them multiple times, posting things on YouTube or, whatever. And so I think that one thing that really is strengthens the broader impact section is having a strong evaluation component of those broader impacts. It's pretty unusual right now to have a strong evaluation of the effectiveness of the broader impact. So I think that really does set it apart. At the same time, for example, on a recent panel, having a weak evaluation plan is probably worse than having none at all. When you have something that just brings up a lot of questions of how are you going to do that? How are you going to assess that? And there's not detail. So I think doing it right can really make that broader impact section stand out. So.
Great. Thanks. I'm Sue Lamont. I'm a faculty member in the Animal Science Department, and I'm also the Equity Advisor for the College of Ag and Life Sciences. So I'm going to talk from the viewpoint of a person that's been very much involved in both single investigator and large collaborative investigator research projects, and a person who's been involved with, I think we've had 7, maybe 8 training grants that have been awarded over the time that I've been here. And I'm going to diverge a little bit from talking specifically about evaluation. Instead, what I'm going to do is to talk about some of the things that I think have been included in the proposals that we've written that have led to their success in the broader impacts areas. So just some examples that may be helpful, and I'm going to group these into the ones that relate to promoting the learning and teaching and training, then enhancing infrastructure and the benefits to society. So in promoting the teaching and training, we generally always have involved in their undergraduates in research projects, and sometimes also the high school students partnering together and giving those examples of the REUs that exist on our campus, and also other programs like the George Washington Carver Summer Internship Program, I think have been incredibly helpful, and we've had the commentary from the review panels that have indicated that. Including the career counseling as part of what is going to be given to the students, not just teaching them the technical aspects of the science, but working with them in a deliberate way on career counseling, and in fact indicating that the graduate students and postdocs are indeed encouraged to participate in preparing future faculty, and several of them in our training grant programs have done that. As has already been mentioned, having the grad students and postdocs mentor undergraduate and rotation students. Generally, we will also have them do classroom teaching too, because we feel that is just so important for their development as future members of the professoriate, as well as helping them so much with their organizational and communication skills. Also, and one thing I've not heard mentioned yet is to engage the trainees in writing proposals. That's an essential skill that they are going to need to have as they progress as scientists. So, stating that they will have roles in proposal writing. I'm also put a very high priority on broadening participation with underrepresented groups, which for me in the animal sciences would include both women and underrepresented racial and ethnic minorities. So that is always written as a goal in those training grants. We do very vigorous recruiting and budget, getting to the conferences which have very high representation of underrepresented students, such as American Indian Science and Engineering Symposium, SACNAS, Manners conferences. And ways to get really engaged there, for example, is to volunteer to be poster judges. They're always looking for faculty members to be involved. That gives you one-on-one time with the students and just sets up an excellent opportunity to not only mentor those students, you're giving them feedback about the quality of their work to this broader audience, but you've also got a great recruiting opportunity there. So enhancing infrastructure in some of our large projects, and one of the large projects that I'm involved with right now is about a $5 million project, and we have a couple of universities in the U.S. Involved in that, and partners in Uganda. So recently I've sent two of my PhD students there to collect some of the samples that we'll need for the research. But in the context of that, they were able to also deliver some training and greatly broaden their experience in science and culture. So I see that as really giving them broadening opportunities. We build in international experiences for every graduate student in the programs, and that's written up as part of the proposal. They'll have significant overseas research experiences, again, really to broaden their experience a great deal. Benefits to society, fortunately for the area that I work in, are very easy to state. I work in the future security of food and human health, so it's very easy to point at where the impacts are going to be in those particular areas. Thanks.
Good morning, almost good afternoon. I'm Soko Starobin, assistant professor in the School of Education, and I'm also a director of the Office of Community College Research and Policy. I prepare the slides just to get the conversation going, and I would ask Diane to post this slide on the SP at ISU website so that you have more information. And what I would like to do is to introduce myself and also the office, what we have been doing to assist the principal investigators like yourself or other collaborators at the Iowa State and also beyond the state of Iowa, namely. Diane asked me to present some of the topics, what we have done in the past, and I just wanted to quickly go through this. Some of you are very closely engaged with the SEEK project at ISU, funded through the NSF, and we were part of that. And also the IO Project Leadaway. How many of you are familiar with the IO Project Leadaway pre-engineering program at the K-12 settings? Thank you very much. And I was able to engage in the assessment process at statewide. So I had the privilege of accessing to the first time ever connecting K-12 to community college MIS and also the post-secondary side, the four-year institution enrollment data, so that we are able to longitudinally track the effect of the Project Leadaway participation on the students. And Professor Shelley indicated that the standardized testing is changing now, so I expect that quite a challenge of doing this line of research. And then also, for this particular project, we employed the quasi-experimental design that Professor Shelley mentioned earlier. We were able to generate the treatment and control group by using the propensity score matching technique. And then again, I am coming from the post-secondary education as a field of the study that I'm engaged in, but I see Dr. Shelley as a mentor in terms of applying the statistical approaches. So the Office of Community College Research and Policy is the one to help someone like you, but also to collaborate with entities like a statistics department and also RISE. I look up Mari in terms of how to operationalize the evaluation processes. Some other things, I am directly engaged as a researcher at a community college completion initiative. I have developed the survey instrument, STEM Student Success Literacy Survey, and I'm particularly studying community college student transfer to four-year institutions. So if you're interested in working with community college student on your laboratory and your classroom to get engaged and then coming to the Iowa State or some other four-year institutions, I would like to work with you, and I would like to have a conversation with you about that. I also worked with the HHMI, summer research experience. Dr. Ogilvy conducted this past summer, and we studied the students from Marshalltown Community College. And the afternoon panelists, I believe, Dr. Lam is going to talk about her Biomap REU project, and we are also closely working with her on that. And Academy for STEM Success, this is the one that I personally worked with the San Diego City College, again, coming from the community college perspective, right? Going from community college to four-year institutions in the STEM field. And then also, my upcoming project will be Texas A&M and then also Palo Alto Community College. So again, particularly looking at the educational trajectory, right? From K to 12 all the way to the four-year institutions and beyond. And what we do and don't, we provide the quantitative measures. I'm not going to repeat what Professor Shelley talked about earlier, and quantitative measures and qualitative measures. And then also some of the caveat will not provide quantitative measures. We have encountered some challenges, right? We cannot report anything. It's violate the FAPA, as you're familiar with the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, anything to do with the disability status, and then also gender and age. It is recorded in the Enrollment Management Office or the Registrar's Office unless there is a IRB process to have the clearance. We won't be able to report, right? And typically how we're going to do this, we're going to rely on the self-reported data through survey and so forth, right? And another things we will not be able to do in the qualitative measures, that we won't be able to report the personal stories. We conduct the interviews and focus groups. But then if anything, the phrase or quotes that will identify the individual, we won't be able to do. However, we typically report as an aggregate so that we can provide the effective information about the implication of your project. What works and what doesn't? What works, partnership early, again, if you're even thinking about writing a proposal, then we would like to be a part of that. I think the earliest possible will be very, very helpful, right? And also tied back to the limitation of the quantitative measures and qualitative measures, IRB process is extremely important in terms of the evaluation and so forth. So the earlier discussion will be key. And communicate frequently. When you're thinking about the survey, we would like to know when would you like to do it, and who's going to help to administer that. And those type of things is very, very critical in terms of the logistical planning and so forth. And then also thinking about the enticing student with the incentives, right? So I have to provide some iPads as a reward to students to respond to my survey. So those are the things that we want to think about early. And what doesn't work, last minute request, again, I think Mari specifically talked about, I need a logic model or something, right? So it doesn't work. It is going to be the long-term collaborative process in terms of the evaluation. And then I think this is the early discussion in the morning about the multidisciplinary approach or interdisciplinary approach that NSF is encouraging. So the monodisciplinary approach, it will not work. It does not work. And opportunities and challenges, I think I don't want to repeat. I think some of the discussions are kind of redundant of the early discussions. And the challenges, I think that the budget issue, I was at the table and someone just mentioned that we are friendly but not free in terms of providing the evaluation assistance. I just wanted to make sure that everyone will think about setting aside for the budget for the evaluation, right? And then the homogeneity of students' characteristics. I think at the Iowa State University it's very challenging to attract underrepresented minority students to STEM field. But thinking about collaborating with some other initiatives happening in the state of Iowa, and then also I just wanted to defer to you, Diane. There is an initiative about LSAMP, attracting undergraduate students into STEM, underrepresented minority students. So if you can collaborate with some of the initiatives, I think you have the success or at least the strong argument in your proposal about this particular topic. And the broader impacts on community and the society, I think that has been well said. So I just wanted to conclude my portion of that. And then this is just a sample outcome measures. Again, this is part of the Project Leadaway quasi-experimental design, and in applying the propensity score matching technique, you can take a look at the demographics, academic backgrounds, and the third box, right? That's the participation of your project or not, right? RE program, so whatever the type of interventions that you may have. And then you can take a look at the outcome measures, either retention or graduation or some other success. And in particularly this project, we looked at the transition to higher education. So then if you take a look at some of the Venn diagram or the figure, you're going to come like this. You have the high school project intervention and then just tracking their educational path. You can also track career path if you will. But those are the type of the things that I'm personally engaging as a research, but also the Office of Community College and Research and Policy can help you to take a look at that. So thank you for the opportunity.
So thank you. Let's take questions. And we will try. We have 2 mics, and so we're going to bring the mics around to you.
Good morning. I heard a lot this morning about broader impacts on K-12 education and how to evaluate those. How about broader impacts on industry? I just came out of an industry background and I'm looking to do research with them. I'm looking to do research that they might be interested in as well, but would be funded by NSF. And so what have been your experiences working on projects that would benefit industry in sort of a broader way?
Well, I can comment a little bit about that because our project actually includes an industry partner who will be integrally involved in the last phase of the research, and it's built that way because our fundamental discoveries will then be tested in the context of the products that are produced by this particular industry. So in that case, we've built a direct line, and it's actually part of the particular proposal. So in that case, the impact will be very immediate. They will have the initial access to testing whether or not indeed the fundamental discoveries can be translated into practice there.
I think one of the broader impact areas is benefit to society, and then there's also increasing the number of underrepresented participants and things like that. It seems like the working with industry goes to benefiting society, and so if you can show and yet if we're talking about National Science Foundation, one of the key things is that it's fundamental science, that it's not developing something only, but it's except for new knowledge, right? So I think having an industry connection can really help in the benefiting to society, and if you can assess that, all the better, right? By putting some numbers to the technologies that are growing out of that, and so I think having that connection can really be strong in that aspect.
Perhaps it's not directly related to the industry benefit, but some of the project that I was engaged in is to measure the post-college earnings of individuals. So then take a look at what are the occupations that they are landed on, and then also how much are they making after going through your project 1 year later, 2 years later, and 3 years later, and so forth. So there are some measures that perhaps that the industry might be interested in looking at as impact.
And if I could just comment on the industry partnerships, I think the partners, they have a lot of the same goals. You know, their goal is workforce development, and are looking at broadening participation and a lot of the same goals that are encouraged through NSF and other agencies. So I think you can just, building industry into your plan gives it greater credibility. You have maybe some more funding to leverage, so funding, budgeting was an issue. So I think there are a lot of advantages, and there are various offices and projects on campus that if you have, you know, if you want to get more connections with industry or look at other creative ways to get them involved, even, for example, the Iowa F-Score has various industry partners, and I think there's good models to follow.
Also, the one on biorenewable chemicals, too, they have a section where industry key partners, and there are results of those collaborations. That would be another example of someone you could talk to.
Other questions?
I was a little confused about the requirements for reporting the broader impacts area. For NSF, we have to write these annual reports and also project completion reports. Do we need to report those activities outside of the required reports?
From what we can see in the new requirements, that you would have to have a specific section in your proposal that would address the broader impacts plan. And then in the reporting, you would have to report the results for the broader impacts. And so that is different as a requirement. Typically, if you've been working with the broader impacts and you have been doing the activities and doing the evaluation, having information, it would be a piece of your reporting, but now it's required.
Yeah, so we don't, I mean, it's not like we have to publish outside of the reports that we submit to the agency as we do our research. So the report to the agency is sufficient.
It sounds like the report to the agency is sufficient. Of course, if you have disseminatable, is that the right word? Information, then that's terrific.
Yeah, I think that the dissemination is an opportunity. So if you have the ability to publish in some of the scholarly journals or conferences, it's a way to get additional recognition for that work. That's a topic that has come up that SPISU is looking at. It's a frequent question. Well, as a faculty member, you know, well, why should I do this broader impact work? How am I getting rewarded for it? You know, is it going to get me promoted and tenured? And in some direct ways it does, because it is going to make you more competitive, at least with the National Science Foundation, with writing broader impacts plans and getting them funded. And so that funding is going to help you fund your science, and you're doing broader impacts with it. But there really are some opportunities, whether you count it as a service to the profession or whether you're able to have some scholarly products from it, you can get some additional recognition for it. The one other reporting that is likely to come down the road that we see is when you do list prior results in your proposals. We have had some faculty say that, you know, they're being held more accountable for reporting on prior results of broader impacts activities in proposals, that the review panels might look for those in the proposals. So not just what were the prior results of your science, but what were the prior results of your broader impacts work? Are you building on that? You know, are there improvements, and so on?
We're the evaluators for the CBERC, the Biorenewable Chemicals Center. And what we are trying to do with the evaluation results is to publish as much as we can from those. And most of the information most of the projects that we work with in that center are based on the pre-college and the university level education programs. And so these programs are kind of built-in broader impacts for that center, because there is, within that center, there's a large scientific, very large and very impressive scientific research piece, and then the broader impacts piece is really the education programs. And so our goal is to publish as much as we can out of the results we get from those evaluations and the research studies that we do, especially with the middle school kids in the GK-12 program that's funded through that particular center. So we're trying to put that kind of information out in the public, and it serves as a way to have some scholarly effort around the broader impacts.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to writing a proposal in early spring, and I have a prior NSF grant, and I need to probably say in the proposal what I did with my broader impacts, right? I promised to do something and post to, maybe summer students and things like this. And also looking forward to future proposals as well. How important is it to have an aspect of broader impacts where you can do some kind of rigorous statistical measure, or is it sufficient to talk about the impact you had on the students, the handful of students that you may have worked with, or the 10 or so students that were in the REU program, or something like this? So these would be, did they go to grad school, or maybe interviews or comments from them? How far do we have to go? Do we have to work with 100 K through 12 students so that we can say what percent compared to the general population? That seems very complicated for individual researchers.
Well, let me try to field that one. I think that just a rule of reason has to apply. If you're dealing with a handful of students in an REU, there's only so much you can do to slice and dice the data about them, and it becomes really more like comparative case studies at that level, which is perfectly okay. If, on the other hand, you are in a position in which the kind of things that Soko was talking about in particular, where you might have thousands of students potentially involved, at that level, it becomes pretty close to imperative to be able to have a more, as you use the word rigorous, more rigorous kind of plan in mind. You have to be very planful about this in advance, because the people who will be reviewing your proposal are going to be pretty steeped in all the do's and don'ts of how to handle large, complex, messy data sets with lots of missing information. You might have to do imputation, and that's where getting technical help on the side, if you think that's necessary, is really going to be essential. You'll have to be able to talk your way through things that are sort of guaranteed to go wrong, all the things that go bump in the night. And anything about data is sort of guaranteed to produce a disaster at some stage if it's a large enough data set, right? And you just simply have to be able to roll with the punches. This is a true statement, right, guys? Okay. Is that a helpful answer?
Can you also address the individual investigator, though, the scope of what they might need to do? I mean, I think your first comment was really important, that it has to be within reason.
Yeah.
As an individual or a small group, they're not going to necessarily, they may not want to see you, overreaching in what you're doing. So they'll want you to have, to do what's within your scope of your budget and resources and so on.
Well, I disagree with what Diane just said. Let me pick up on the point of budgeting. Maureen, I wanted to say something about this. This may be an opportunity. So if you've got a handful of students in an REU, do you need to have a big evaluation budget? Probably not. If you've got a really big, complex, let's say multiple REU activity going on, maybe multi-institutional activity, maybe there are lots of students involved, lots of teachers, lots of other moving parts. At that point, you do need to budget for that very carefully to make sure that, again, in terms of a rule of reason, that what you budgeted is appropriate to fit the crime, if you will. So you want to be sure that it's clear that you're going to be buying the brain power and the heavy lifters who could help out as needed. And I think the phrase was used earlier is we're friendly and available, but not necessarily free, and not necessarily cheap either, for that matter. And I don't know if you want to get into details about budgets, but
Well, there's kind of a rule of thumb that NSF talks about for these budgets, and starting at 15% for evaluation, and then we kind of work our way down. And so sometimes we're more like 8 to 10%, and it clearly depends on what the scope of the work would be, and whether a 3% or a 5% is a reasonable kind of thing. You know, you get some of the grant programs that limit the evaluation percentage. GK-12, for example, it's 2.5%. You can't do very much on 2.5%, but their rationale is that there are lots of other GK-12 projects out there, and maybe you can share some materials and that sort of thing. We've been very fortunate with our GK-12 because we have had additional funding through Seaburg and through Iowa State to help support the evaluation of those projects, and so that's helped us a lot. And again, that's why we're able to do some of the scholarly work, because we can do additional things that some projects can't do.
Terry, I wanted to add an additional comment on yours, because I think it's a good one, and that is the idea of a track record. And whether you have a previous NSF grant and you have to talk about broader impact, or whether it's your first grant to NSF, one thing that really adds a lot of weight to the proposal is to show a track record of broader impacts. And I think at the single investigator or dual investigator level, you can talk about things like, you worked with an undergrad and you published this conference proceeding or this paper. Those kinds of things maybe aren't as they're more of a case study kind of approach, but they really hit the point of adding to the credibility that you have this commitment to these broader impacts, and it really differentiates the proposals, the ones that show a clear track record in broader impacts, than those that just are proposing to do these broader impacts.
And then I would like to come from the different perspective, because again, my field of study is higher education, right? So then I just wanted to make sure that it's all relative, and if you can afford a large data set, that's great, but if it's a case study approach, great. But I think it is also important to talk about the institutional or departmental culture. For instance, again, attracting underrepresented minority students or females for some of your disciplines is extremely difficult. So I think talks about that cultural piece to it. I think it's pretty important. And I see the Iowa State University is a predominantly white institution, and I think you have to say that up front and then see what you can do to provide a broader impact for the students, given the caveat of the institution we have. And then also we are in the state of Iowa, and I think you can talk about the demographics of the Iowa, and then also within that context, what can we do and what can you do to provide and show the evidence of the broader impact. So.
We may have time for one more question.
Sure. I'm not sure if I'm going to catch it.
I have a quick one. Do you know whether NSF has any system in place to evaluate the effectiveness of all these projects that have been funded? You know, we're doing the evaluation, internal, external, everything is in place, but is there any database or anything that we can potentially access to see whether these projects made that broader impact or not? You know, we can go in, check, what got funded, and then what do we do next? We would have to go to individual investigators, or do you know if NSF is thinking about having anything like that in place? Kind of to make that process more transparent and see how we as new investigators, like myself, for instance, can propose successful proposals, and include that broader impact section that will be coming up after January 14th.
I can give a partial answer. You talked about checking with other investigators, and that is one thing to do. Depends a bit, I think, on the program area within NSF. And some of them, it seems like they're more willing to post reports that are easily available online. And if you know the name of the project, you can probably Google something up that'll get to a report or PI contact information. I think NSF does this less than the U.S. Department of Ed, but there is, I think, an emerging trend in the FedStats area to try to build in sort of meta-analytic activities. I'm more aware of that with U.S. Department of Ed funding, but I think NSF may be heading there as well now. So you have lots of often very small programs, and they may show almost completely contrary results. So sort of like the studies that sometimes show that caffeine will kill you, or it's wonderful for you, or it's somewhere in between. We seem to have a new report every year or so that says exactly the opposite. So from sort of the medical clinical trials aggregation logic, there's more of that effort underway, particularly for these relatively small efforts that individually may not be terribly convincing or may be contradictory. Is that a fair enough statement?
Well, thank you very much. Let's thank all of our panelists.